Hi everyone, it's Kelly from Kellie's Bead Boutique. So I get a question all the time. How did I start in this business? So I thought, well, I'm going to throw it back out to you guys because I've had a few people ask me lately if I would do a video on it. So I asked the question on a few different social media platforms and I got lots of questions from you guys as to how I got started and a few other things. So I've got a big list here and I'm going to try and get through them. You will have to excuse me. One, my voice is still really raspy from that horrible cough, flu, cold thing that I had. And two, I have a cataract. Yeah, I'm old. In my right eye, and I can't see even with these new glasses. So you'll see when I look down that I squint. That's because I can't see. So the joys of getting old. Better than the alternative, I guess, but it is kind of a drag. So anyways, let's dive right into this. Okay, so the first one is from Linda. She said, before YouTube, were you already an established jewelry designer? Did you learn from someone or just self-taught yourself how to make jewelry? All right, good question, Linda. So I kind of have a little bit of a backstory that I'll go through. It's just, I'll just kind of briefly do it. So I worked for the local police force here, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. If you're not from Canada, they're our national police force. And I worked in the jail as a guard. And I did that for a long time and I absolutely loved my job. I was good at it. I really enjoyed it. And I even enjoyed working with prisoners. I know it's kind of weird, but I did really like that. I come from a long line of family members who've worked in law enforcement, and so it was sort of natural for me to, go into that somehow. So, and then I met my husband. And the year that I met my husband, he took me houseboating with a bunch of his friends. And one night, one of the girls said, "Okay, girls, tonight we're going to make jewelry." And I looked at her like, "What? Make jewelry?" I didn't even wear jewelry. I wore a pair of gold hoops and a ring, and that was about it. And there's a picture of me that I've got buried in the archives somewhere of me sitting there on the houseboat quickly making up this piece of jewelry. I think it was a bracelet. And I had such a good time and I was literally hooked. And that was in September. And as soon as I got home from houseboating, I started taking classes. So there's a store about 40 minutes east of here. And that was where I took my first class. And the rest is history. So that's sort of how I got started. So a lot of my stuff is self-taught, but I have taken classes all over North America from some very, very well known designers. And I too have watched lots of YouTube videos and read books and just kind of created my own thing as I've gone along. So that's kind of how I got started. So Anne asks, are you a first generation beader? Yes, I am. Nobody else has ever done any beading in my family. I think my cousin back east has done a little bit of it, but other than that, that's it. I've always been really crafty, as were both of my grandmothers. So I come from a sort of a long line of women that like to create things. Not my mom. Sorry, Mom. We took a picture of my mom threading a needle once. That's how bad it is with Mom. Mom's creative in the kitchen. She's a very good cook. I'll give her that one. Kathy asked, how old were you when the beading bug bit you? Well, Kathy, I was 44, I believe, somewhere around then. I was a little late in life. I had all kinds of other creative things that I worked on before that, but I was a little bit older. Denise asks, what's the best piece of advice you would give for someone considering starting their own jewelry online business? What do you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning? Well, Denise, that's a really good question. It has changed a lot since when I started 16 years ago. There was no social media back when I started. There was the internet, of course, but really it was having a website and just learning how to market that website. Now a lot of businesses have closed in that, like brick and mortar stores, because that was one of the ways that I got found, was being in brick and mortar stores, having my jewelry in stores all across Canada. So a lot of those stores have closed or changed due to the economy. So things are different now. So I think the best way to get started is just have a really clear idea of what you want to do. If you're in it for the money, don't do it. You have to have a love for this business. It's a hard business because so many people are dabbling in it. So you really have to have a clear vision of where you want to go. You have to do yourself, don't copy others, and really just be creative and have fun with it. That's really where I think that a lot of people go wrong, is they think, I'm going to make $1 million doing this. You're not going to. Well, you may, but it could take a long time, and the chances are that you won't. So Melissa asks, what came first, crafting or entrepreneurship? I love your videos. They're so informational, and I sometimes watch them over and over as I attempt a project. I should put attempt in quotes. I'm pretty sure that you're pretty good at that, Melissa. And thank you very much for the compliment. I do appreciate it. So I don't know. I've had a couple businesses. Way back in the 80s, I had a craft business selling, the 80s country crafts with lots of dried flowers and potpourri and all that kind of stuff. But I had little kids at home, and I found it really challenging to be a mom and to work 24 hours a day out of my garage, and it was just too much for me. And I got to the point where I needed to hire staff, but I was too afraid to. So I chickened out and closed down, which was really silly. And that always stuck in the back of my brain, like, what if I had kept going? Of course, the business would have changed because 80s country crafts are no longer popular. But I always wondered, where could I have gone? So I guess for me, crafting has always been the core of who I am. I was always that person. When I saw a pillow for $45, I'd say, well, I'm not paying $45. I'll just make it for $12, and then probably spend $200 buying material and everything else, as we all do. But I've always had that sort of love of selling, and so it was kind of, for me, it's a little bit of both. I hope that's not a confusing answer, but really it is both. I've always been a creative, crafty kind of person, and I've always loved selling. Back before I started working for the RCMP, I was a merchandiser for Nestle's in their candy division. I was the most popular mom on the block, of course. I had chocolate bars all over the place. So I've always loved selling things. That's just been my thing. So Deb asks, what made you decide to do this for a living versus a hobby? And how do you keep your enthusiasm going now that it's a job? Well, Deb, it kind of just happened. So after I got back from my houseboating trip and I took a couple classes, I started making some pieces and wearing them around the detachment. And I worked for a very large detachment, so there was a lot of people and a lot of women and a lot of guys who bought the stuff too. Anyway, people would start saying things like, oh, Kelly, I really like that bracelet. Where did you get it? And I would say, well, I made it. Oh, can I buy one? And that's how it kind of started. And then I had this really lovely staff sergeant who said, hey, Kel, why don't you set up a table and see if you can sell some of your stuff one time during lunch? So I set up a table in the middle of the atrium of the detachment, and I think I made $1,000 in an hour. And that was, 16 years ago, which was a fair amount of money. So I was really surprised at how much people enjoyed my jewelry. And it was really simple stuff back then. It was nothing, no big bells and whistles. It was just really simple. So I think that's what kind of gave me the idea that, well, maybe I could turn this into not really a business. I'd never thought of a business because I always said that they would be taking me out of the jail, like, on a stretcher in my 80s or something, because I really did love my job and I had zero intention of leaving. So it's just one of those things that kind of progressed. Things just kind of changed, and that's what happened. So I guess I should give you a little bit of other backstory in that I did eventually leave my job working for the RCMP. So what happened was I started creating all these pieces and people started buying them and really liked them. And next thing I know, I'm selling them to, like, as I always say, every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there. People were just buying jewelry from me like crazy. And so I kind of thought, well, maybe I have something here. Maybe I should try and sell it a little bit further. So I would put on my best piece of jewelry and I would go to a store and I would kind of, scope it out and see who the owner was. And eventually I got into stores. It's a whole other big backstory, but I don't want to, keep you here for an hour. But essentially I just kind of started selling to stores. And within my first year of business, just by doing it part-time and just kind of playing around and being in local stores, I did $20,000 in business, which was pretty good, I thought, for just having a little tiny part-time business. And then the next year I decided that I needed to, branch out a little bit further. So a friend of mine who I always say could sell snow to the Eskimos, she approached me and asked if she could rep my line because she really loved my jewelry. So Bev is such a brilliant salesperson. She managed to take my business from that little $20,000 business to over $100,000 with the next year, which again, 16 years ago, was a lot of money. So she managed to get my jewelry in, I don't know what it was, if I remember, somewhere around maybe 40 stores in the BC and Alberta. Those are two neighboring provinces. And so she managed to get them in those two provinces in lots of different stores. So Bev really helped establish my business. And so we did that for a couple years and my business kept growing. And then I was approached by a national rep team that had 13 sales reps across Canada. And I changed to a different kind of rep system and I ended up in about 80 stores across Canada, and that took me into a completely different income bracket. And it was at that transitional point that I decided to end my job with the police department and just do this full time. So that's what happened. And then hopefully later I'll explain what happened with that part of it. So, and Deb also asked, how do I keep my enthusiasm now that it's a job? Well, that is a challenge, especially for me, because I do own a store. There's lots of questions in here as to whether or not I have a brick and mortar store or do I just, buy craft supplies. I do have a very busy, very large store here in a small town called Pitt Meadows, British Columbia. And I'm about an hour east of Vancouver, BC. So we don't have a lot of bead stores this is called the Lower Mainland. And we don't have a lot of bead stores. There's maybe 4, I think, in sort of 4 different corners. I'm one of the only ones that does wholesale, as far as I know. And so I've built a pretty big business. I have 7 staff members. We're open 7 days a week. We have a huge online business now. Thanks to you guys. I really do appreciate all the orders. So my business has really changed in the last few years. So it is hard to remain enthusiastic. It is 8:30 on a Sunday morning. My husband's at home chilling out and I'm working. I work 7 days a week. I very, very seldom get to actually take a real day off where I'm just doing nothing. I'm always working somehow, and not to be like, oh, woe is me, but it can get challenging. So I think if you want to remain enthusiastic about something, you have to love what you're doing. If you're simply doing something for the money or because somebody else told you to, or it's what you think you should be doing, it's hard to remain enthusiastic. And even after 16 years, working 7 days a week, working very long hours, I love what I do. So Rita asks, I know you work as a jail guard or something. What was that experience? Did you do any jewelry? And what was the first thing you bought to do jewelry? What was your first piece? And do you have any other hobbies? So as I sort of explained before, yes, I did work as a jail guard. And I think the first thing I bought was some tools. And of course, I'm like everybody else. I go to Michael's and I buy the cheap tools. And within a couple months, I threw those in the garbage and went and bought better tools. I always say to try and buy the best tools that you can afford, because the ones that they sell at the hobby stores are just really, they're not good quality. And your pieces won't turn out as nice. So that's one piece of advice I can give you. And so what was my first piece? I believe it was a bracelet. I know that it was a bracelet in the very first class that I took, but I believe when I was making the piece of jewelry on the houseboat that it was a bracelet and maybe an anklet, but that was 16 years ago and I can't quite remember. And do I have any other hobbies now? No, unfortunately I don't. I have no other hobbies. I am so busy and I'm pretty tired all the time. And now with my newfound vision problems, I just can't do anything. So this is it. This is pretty, this keeps me busy. Erin asks, I guess one question would be to ask where you got the training that started you in this career move. Were you self-taught and trained under another person? So as I have mentioned, I did do some classes. So very quickly, I think within the second year of me doing this, I flew down to California and I took a bunch of classes from Lisa Niven Kellie and Kate Rishberg, who you might see on beadshop.com, and a bunch of other sort of national instructors. And that was what really got me hooked, was that I flew around to different places in the United States and in Canada and took classes from renowned designers and teachers, people that really knew their stuff. And yes, it was an investment in both money and time, but I think that was what really helped me move forward in this business. So Philistine asked, did you have a certain amount of money when you started out? No, I didn't. I just took a little bit of money and I went to a local bead store and I bought some beads, and then, I sold some things. And so then I bought some more beads, and then I sold some more stuff and bought, that's how most people start. So I didn't set aside any amount of money when I started my jewelry business. Now, eventually, what happened was, I think in 2008, especially in the United States, there was a recession. And what I found was the recession actually trickled over into Canada. Not so much that we had a recession here, but I did notice, because we are very closely connected to the news and what goes on in the United States, I felt this pullback. Where people were all of a sudden having their orders and like halving their orders. So what I used to sell, like maybe a $1,200 order to a store, was all of a sudden a $500 order. And I just noticed my business kind of like cut in half overnight. It was just this crazy thing. And I really, really felt this pullback from everybody. And so I was sitting there one day thinking, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to beat this recession? How am I going to keep moving? And at that point, I was getting very tired of what I was doing, because when you get to that kind of big success that I met or was at, sometimes when I go to speak, it doesn't come out the right way. When you get to that kind of success, and there goes my voice now, it becomes a whole lot about getting other people to do things. So I had all these sales reps and I had people manufacturing for me and all this sort of stuff. I ended up being basically a paper pusher, and I didn't really enjoy that part of it. So I was getting tired of doing the jewelry design big business thing, and I was kind of just burnt right out, but I still wanted to stay in this business. And I was at an event one night, and the girls at the event were saying, Kellie, what's the matter with you? You're not your usual self tonight. Because basically I walked around going, all night, because I was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to do it anymore. You know, I had to go on and be all like, oh, hi. And I just wasn't feeling it. So I got in my car that night and I went, okay, I'm done with this. Because sometimes if I actually say the words, that means exactly what I want to do. That was my intention. And I literally drove 5 minutes down the road and I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. What am I going to do? I know, I'll open a bead store in a recession. So I got home and it was like 10:30 at night. I woke up my husband. I said, honey, I'm closing down my jewelry business and I'm going to open up a bead store. He's like, can you talk to me about this in the morning? And that was literally what happened. So that was in October. We have Thanksgiving here around the second week of October. So October 10th, I signed my lease. That's how fast I move. I'm kind of crazy like that. We opened my first store December 10th. So 2 months after I signed the lease and made a decision to move forward, I opened my first store. I'm laughing so hard because if you think back, it was pretty crazy. But somehow it all worked out. I'm quite tenacious. I keep working as hard as I can. I looked like I was drunk half the time because I got no sleep for about 2 years. So that was how that transition happened. So it was a little bit crazy, but I'm so glad that I did it. So Tanya asked sort of a same question. She said, how much capital did you have when you got started? Well, as I said in the previous question, when I started my jewelry business, I didn't have any capital. I just kind of started and grew. When I didn't sell my business, when I closed my jewelry business, I had 13 sales reps who each had about 100 pieces of jewelry that they would show to all the stores in their area. So I had them all send that back to me. So I had about 1,500 pieces of jewelry sitting in my workshop. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do with that now? And that was what got me to create enough money, really is what it was, to open my bead store. I contacted every human that I knew and said, can you throw a jewelry party where I'm going to sell off my jewelry at dirt cheap? So I had about 10 friends invite all their friends to parties in their homes, and we sold off every piece of jewelry that I had, and I ended up with $20,000. It doesn't sound like a lot, and it really wasn't, but it was enough to open my store. It gave me enough to do the renovations and to order a small amount of beads. I remember when they were first up on the wall, I looked around and went, uh-oh. We got a lot of work here. There was really probably only a quarter of the store even filled with beads. It was pretty funny. But I was lucky in that I was in an area where there was no bead stores and people really took to it. I started doing classes right away and I just kept building my business, and I didn't take any money for a very long time. Every dime that came in the door went right back into the store. So that's how I created enough money. So if you're wanting to start a jewelry business, I would suggest doing the same. Start off with a little bit of pocket money, like, I don't know, $500 or $1,000, whatever you can afford. Make some pieces, sell them. Keep that money, buy more product, and keep going from there. That's sort of the best advice I can give on that. So Brandy asks, what were your top 3 rookie mistakes and what was the solution? And thanks so much for the great videos. You're welcome, Brandy. I really appreciate the comment. And I love doing them, so it makes me happy to see you guys liking them too. My top 3 rookie mistakes. Well, it depends on which business you're talking about. I guess if we talk about my jewelry business, the first 3 rookie mistakes. One was letting my beloved sales rep Bev go. That was a really hard decision. I was courted, literally, by this national rep team. I had approached them before Bev worked for me, and they didn't want me because I wasn't big enough. So they watched my growth. And then when I was at the peak of my growth, that's when they swooped in and promised me all kinds of things. And it was a really hard decision, and I know I really hurt Bev by doing that, and it was a terrible thing to do in business. I really didn't like it, and it came out all wrong, and it was not good. So that was a huge mistake. Thankfully, Bev and I are still friends after all these years. I think she forgave me and understood that, I hope she understood that it was a business decision, but that national rep team, they were no good. Which leads into my second rookie mistake, was listening to them. So I had created this business. I was probably in business at that point about 7 years. I knew my business. I knew what I made. I knew what my customers wanted. And they came in and they're like, well, we love your stuff. However, why don't you try doing this? And I said, no, that's not going to work. Well, they said, yes, it will. You need to do it. So I spent thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Like, I am not kidding when I say many thousands of dollars, completely changing my line for them. And you know that line completely tanked. I probably only made $1,000 on it, and I had to pay out 30% rep fees and all kinds of stuff. So that was a complete tank, listening to somebody when I knew in my heart that was not the way to go. And my third rookie mistake, do I even have one? Well, this is more along the lines of my store. It was moving my store to a second location. I outgrew my first location very, very quickly. And so I thought that bigger would be better. And I didn't pay enough attention to where I moved to. And I spent 5 long years in a location with a terrible, terrible landlord. And it caused me a nervous breakdown, which is not something that I admit very often. But it was horrible. And I'm so much happier here. It's been a really great experience to move to my third, final, and last location. So Mary asked, how did I start selling beads? Well, that was, like I explained before, that was sort of my transition when I decided to open my brick and mortar store. But she also asks, what was my most challenging project? I think anything soldering for me is a challenging project. I don't get enough time behind a torch to make that my, sort of forte. I do love to fuse, and I'm trying to figure out how to do a fusing video. Fire and cameras and all that kind of stuff, they don't really work so well for me, so I haven't been able to figure that out. But I did make a project, now we're going back about 7 years in the old store, where I took a piece of copper sheet and I formed it into like a little marquee, like looks like an eye the other way, like a marquee, and I punched holes all down the side, and then with wire I laced on crystal rhinestone chain on the outside, and then I punched a hole in the middle and I riveted this I think it was like some sort of a crystal thing, I can't even remember, and then I patinaed it, and it was really spectacular. And anytime that I put that picture up, people were like, wow, that was really pretty. It was very challenging. I think it was a class, but I don't think it was super popular because people could tell that it was really challenging. But I love to challenge myself, and unfortunately, because I'm so busy, I don't get to do that very often. So sometimes it's fun to create something that's completely out of your comfort zone or out of your wheelhouse. So Christine asks me a question that I get asked quite often, and I really appreciate that people do ask this question. So she says, I'm wearing 2 bracelets you designed and taught through YouTube. Thank you. How do you sell such lovely work, and can we sell jewelry made from your designs? I will certainly give you the credit, but what are the rules around that? I don't want to step on any copyright laws or good neighbor rules. Well, thank you very much, Christine, for asking that. Personally, I'm really lax about that. As far as if I put something on YouTube, you guys are more than welcome to create them to wear or to sell. The only thing I ask is that you don't teach them. If you do teach them, please ask me first. I've had a few people say, I have a little store in the mountains of South Carolina or something like that. Do you mind if I teach that product? Or that project if I give you credit? Of course, I'm probably going to say yes, because sometimes it's just easier to say yes than to say no to everything. And if you give me credit, then that's all I really ask. Now, I do wear a bracelet in a lot of my videos, and many, 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 many people have said, can you please teach that one? That was not my project. It was from a YouTube video, and I made it and I loved it. And I did tweak it and make it completely different than what she did. But because so many people asked me if I could teach it on my YouTube video, I approached the designer and said, hey, I've had lots of my viewers that would like me to teach it, and I have changed it enough that it does look different. Do you mind if I teach it? And she said no. I have to agree with her and say, okay, well, I'm sorry, I won't teach it then. So although I get asked all the time, I think even just this last week, somebody said, can you teach that bracelet? I have to listen to what she said, and I can't teach that piece. So really what you have to do is, if you see something on YouTube or in another, like on Pinterest or wherever you might see it, if you want to make it, you really should approach the designer and ask. Many people will give you permission if you give them credit. A lot of people won't. It depends on the designer. So as far as I am concerned, if you see one of my projects on YouTube, you're more than welcome to create that piece and to sell it at all your craft fairs and all over the place. If somebody says, where did you come up with that design? I would appreciate that you say, well, Kellie Sutton made it. She has Kellie's Bead Boutique. Just a little thing. Harriet asks if I would do a tour of my store. Now, I have been asked this a lot, so that's going to be an upcoming video. I just have to kind of figure out the logistics of how not to have a shaky camera. I only use my phone when I do these. A lot of people have really fancy rigs. They have all these fancy things, but I'm technologically challenged when it comes to that stuff. So I have a brand new iPhone that has really good quality, so that's all I use. So we'll have to figure that one out, but watch for an upcoming store video. So Shea Natural asks, what's your favorite type of jewelry to make? Probably leather, as I think you guys have figured out. I love barrel knots. I love making knots, and I love leather. So that's sort of the thing that I challenge myself with the most these days. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said anything metal, anything where you cut metal out, patina, hammer, all that sort of stuff. So I guess I do love both things. She also asks, what advice do you have for online shop owners regarding best tips and encouragement? Well, again, I think it goes back to you have to love what you're doing. You're going to have a lot of competition. Everybody and their dog has set up a shop these days. If you go onto Etsy and type in beads, you'll see how many, I don't know, it's like 43 million different things come up, literally. You type it in someday, it's crazy. So I think you really have to love what you're doing. One of the things that I always advise is do not undersell yourself. My husband and I like to talk about business a lot. Up until recently, he had his own business too. And one of the things that he sees happening, and it's happening in this industry all the time, and it is my biggest pet peeve, is that it's going to be a quick race to the bottom. In that, so let's say I sell something for $2. And then Mary Jane opens a store and she's like, well, I'm going to sell that for $1.95. And then Susie opens up a store and she says, well, I'm going to sell that for $1.90. And then Erin opens up that store and she says, well, I'm going to sell it for $1.50. So then most people go to Erin. The problem is that Erin's probably only making 5 cents on that. She can't run her shop on 5 cents and she will quickly be out of business. I'll still be in business selling my product for what it actually should be sold for. So women are the worst at that. One of the things that I find, and this, I don't mean this to come across as like, well, women are weak or whatever, but what I do find is that men never seem to devalue themselves when it comes to making money, and women always want to give things away. When you go to a craft fair, how many times will you see somebody selling a bracelet, like just maybe one of these like little simple stretchy bracelets? They'll be selling, one person will be selling it for $40. And then the table next to her, she'll be selling it for $19. And you wonder, well, what's the difference? Well, in my opinion, if you're actually asking my opinion, the girl that's selling it for $40 is a businesswoman. The person that's selling it for $19 is a hobbyist who knows nothing about business and isn't going to stay in business very long. When I had my jewelry business, I thought nothing of selling a pair of earrings for $65. Now, granted, mine were sterling silver, but I sold mine for $49, $59, $65, $69. I even had some $99 pairs of earrings. I had necklaces that were $300. I had jewelry that was in the $200s and the $300 all the time. Did I worry about that? No, because there's a buyer for everything. You need to make enough money to stay in business. So don't undervalue your stuff. Come up with a formula and then stick to it and work from there. That's probably my best piece of advice for any kind of business, whether it's jewelry business, a bead business, whatever you're going to do. Do not get involved in that race to the bottom where you're going to sell it for less, because that won't make you any money and you'll very quickly be out of business. So Lisa asks, when did you open your shop and how long has your shop been open? I opened my store in December of 2010. So this December, we're going to be open 10 years. I cannot even believe it's been 10 years. But in total with the beading world, I've been involved for 16 years now. It's just going by so quickly. It's actually coming up 16 years in about 2 weeks, because we went away in the Labor Day long weekend 16 years ago, and that's how it all got started. So Lynn asks, did someone or something inspire you to start this career? Well, it really is my friend Daniela's fault. She's the girl that taught me how to do it on our houseboating trip. So I always blame her and say, you know what, it's all your fault that I started this. But I still love what I do. So really it is, all due to Daniela. If I hadn't gone on that houseboating trip, I never would have left my job. I never would have started this, and I never would have created something that I absolutely love. So Julia, if I've killed your name, I apologize. It's a pretty name, but I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Was running a bead business something you always wanted to do? No, I didn't even know anything about beads. The only thing I knew about beads was that, it was kind of a hippie thing. That's what I thought. It's not. But that's all I knew about beads. It was never even something that I gave 2 seconds of thought to. So I still sometimes stand here and look around and go, wow, I can't believe I created this store. So I think I've got one last question here. So Rachel asks, where does your jewelry inspiration come from? And do you purchase items and then design, or do you design then buy? Well, my design inspirations come from every single place that I go. I am often inspired by things in nature. Maybe it's colors or textures. Of course, like most people, I'm on Pinterest, and I don't ever copy designs, but what I'll do is I'll see a design and go, oh, okay, I like the way that looked, and then I'm going to do this to it. So I make it completely different, and it doesn't even look anything like it. But what it does is it sparks a little thing in my brain going, oh yeah, I have a part that looks similar to that, but I want to do this with it. So it's not about copying a design for me. It's about sparking something in my brain that I didn't even think about, because you have to remember, I have a 2,000 square foot store that is completely loaded with stuff. So for me, I just walk around sometimes and go, oh, what am I going to make? So sometimes just having focusing on one part will help me create something. So I get my inspiration from everywhere. I see different ads that are out there. I look at what people are wearing. I follow trends, colors, all sorts of things. So you really have to keep your eyes open when it comes to inspiration. You have to just sort of look at all sorts of different things. And you have to be creative. You have to maybe, like the other day, I was thinking about making a pair of earrings where I used 2 different rings and some chain, and I was trying to create it in my brain. Some people are sketchers. I can't even sign my own name properly. It looks terrible. I'm not a writer or a drawer or anything like that. So for me, sketching isn't my wheelhouse. I'm more in here. So I always say I do my best thinking in the shower. So I'm often like putting together a piece of jewelry when I'm putting the lotion in my hair. So you have to just sort of think about what's the way that you like to create. Do you like to sketch an idea down, or do you like to just take some pieces and kind of move some things around on a board? So create the way that makes you feel comfortable. That's sort of what I do, and I kill a lot of stuff. That's just the way it goes. But I'm lucky because I have a whole store behind me. So, if I waste a few things, it's not such a big deal. And so then she says, did I purchase the items and then design, or do I design and then buy? Well, if you look behind me, I've got that whole 2,000 square feet full of beads. I usually just sort of, try to find things that I love and then create from that. I think that that's a little bit easier. So if if you're in a bit of a rut, try doing that. Just buy beads that you love. And when I have people come in the store and they say, well, I only have $50 and I want to buy some stuff, what should I buy? I always tell them, buy what you love. Don't buy what's trendy or what you think you should buy or what somebody else tells you to buy. Maybe wait until it's on sale so you can get a little more, but buy what you love. That's the best advice that I can give. So if you've managed to make it to the end of this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus. So you can get 20% off on your online order by just typing in the word DEAL20. So DEAL20, and you'll get 20% off of your order. I'll have all the information in the box below, so just press the little down arrow and it'll be in the description box, and you can save yourself a little bit of money. So I hope that this answered some of your questions. I sort of ramble a little bit because I've never done one of these Q&As, and it's a little bit different. I don't know what to do with my hands because I'm always having a pair of pliers in them. That's the way that I usually go. So I want to thank you all for watching. I want you to leave me a comment below and tell me, where do you get your design inspiration from? I always love to hear where people find their inspiration. So if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please make sure that you do so. Leave me a comment always. I love to hear from everybody, and make sure to press that little notification bell. I've heard that YouTube isn't sending out any notifications. I only get 2 out of the 20 people I subscribe to. I get 2 in a week. So the chances of you getting a notification are pretty slim. But generally, I try to put out a new video every Monday at 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So usually hang around your computer somewhere around then and you will find my new video. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to write me and give me all these questions. Some of them were really great, and I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you all for watching, and we will see you on the next one.